Welcome to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. I'm Lisa Watson and we'll be joined by my co-hosts Nicole Frolick and Brian Koenigberg. The enLIGHTenUP podcast is a weekly show that provides an unconventional and refreshing spin on spirituality, where three friends and weekly guests share informative, fun, and usually off-the-wall conversations. Unlike others, we provide fringe and skeptical viewpoints on all topics, because our experience has taught us that the echo chamber is a boring place from which to learn. So regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, we can promise you're going to find a place to fit in here. So we invite you to grab a drink and listen in on our casual, entertaining, and hopefully enlightening conversation. And enLIGHTenUP is a self-funded podcast, so if you would like to help us to continue to be able to produce, enhance, and expand the show for our audience, then please send your support using the link in the show notes, or go to our website, enlightenup.us, and check out our merchandise shop, where you can purchase merchandise that will allow you to express some spiritual humor. You may also show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes and following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting us, and now let's jump right into the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. I am here with Lisa and Brian, and we have a guest co-host actually here. Frank Lifford is visiting Lisa and Brian. So Frank, welcome back to the enLIGHTenUP podcast. Good to have you on our side this time.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So we have another guest, our main guest coming on today. Matthew Mournian is returning to the show. If you haven't heard any of Matthew's previous episodes with us, he is a psychic, intuitive empath, and energetic healer specializing in clearing, balancing, and removing negative energy and emotions from the body. He uses an integrative method of tarot reading, hypnotherapy, and energy transmission extraction that will literally lead to a major shift in a very short period of time. He's a certified addiction counselor and clearing practitioner with his primary focus on healing and clearing the negative emotional attachments and energetic threads that block us from our true knowing of ourselves and realizing our life's mission. Matthew, welcome back. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. So grateful to be here.
It's so good to have you. Well, it's snowing up a storm here in Colorado this morning. How's it over in California?
Let's see. We had a little bit of rain for the first time in many months, which means for us it goes down to about 50 Fahrenheit, which is blisteringly cold for Southern California. So
Yeah, it is. Wow.
It's all relative.
Where in Southern Cal are you? In Los Angeles?
I'm right down here in LA, not too far away from the tar pits. Centralized Los Angeles, we could say, right in the thick of all the craziness. But yeah, it's chill.
Awesome. Well, you've been up to a bunch of new stuff. Are you studying QHHT?
I have a huge file. I paid for it, and I'm right in the middle of doing this multi-week class thing, and so that is the next project that is on the way. We are right about to start doing that, but I would say right now at this stage, it's really just getting ready and kind of integrating this thing called fourth density that we're all experiencing. So that's been the bulk of my work.
Well, take us in there. What's happening in the fourth density that needs all this clearing?
That's a very good question. And so I guess I would start out by saying, if you're one of the people that hears this here show, if you end up on this podcast, if you're hearing this, I want to say congratulations. You have made it into fourth density. It's a fact. This is a thing that we're experiencing. And for those of you that may hear that and go, okay, great. Well, what the hell is fourth density? That's an even better question. And what fourth density is essentially is the next evolutionary state of human consciousness. It's the next version of you, the next version of me. Each and every one of us agreed to incarnate during a time period in which we were going to get to experience some element of this great shift. And so what we're discovering with fourth density energy right now is that as we awaken to this new version of ourselves, there's a whole series of elements, etheric structures, even organs, literal organs in the body that are being discovered right now that are, it's not that they haven't been there previously, but with our expanded awareness, we're coming into greater levels of understanding about what's really going on in the body during this shift. And so I would like to think that, my work is assisting with that or helping on some level with people, especially remove the frequency of negative emotional energy from the body. But So yeah, we do that through clearing meridians, clearing chakras, and really at this stage working with whatever is not yours, whatever you're holding on to. And there's a tremendous amount of us that are holding on to a huge amount of energy, whether it be emotions, whether it be experiences that quite literally are not ours anymore. So hopefully teaching people how to get that stuff out of the body and retain sovereignty, I guess we could say. So
Okay.
hope that makes sense.
Yeah, but circling back to the organ message there. So what exactly is being discovered around the organs as people are moving in?
Well, that is a really, really good question. I'm so glad you asked me. And so for some of you guys that are probably, within like the medical realm or have, some knowledge and are listening to this podcast, they're going, what the hell is this guy talking about? And you can Google this right now. It's called the interstitium. The interstitium. Technically, it means the layer in the midst of our cells, like in between the cells. It interacts very heavily with the lymphatic system. And I believe sometime in 2016, maybe 2017, this was basically re-observed by people in the medical community as being this layer that only expands when tissue is alive, only expands when tissue is open and sort of breathing. And what happens is what they discovered was that when they would take a tissue sample, out of the body and they would like put it up on this slide and observe it, what they realized was that that layer, the interstitial layer inside our cells would actually collapse and it would like compress. And so what they discovered through, I believe it was arthroscopic surgery or some of those internal tools with which they used to observe the environment was that we had a literal liquid layer of energy and actual liquid. It interacts very heavily with the lymph in our body, and that's lining the entirety of the inside of the body, very much synonymous with the lymph fluid and the movement of that being kind of like the body's irrigation system. And so one of the things we're discovering in fourth density energy medicine is that this liquid layer lining the body is one of the most forgotten and untouched areas of the body. It holds a vibration, much like cymatics, in which they were like putting a frequency onto water and they were watching how like the molecules would change and shift. Well, we have a layer very similar to that in our body known as the interstitium, and that's interacting with all kinds of frequencies, all kinds of energies, but in my opinion primarily emotional vibrations. So I don't know if that answered any of your questions, but y'all can go like Google that right now. And
You made an interesting word choice. You said in 2016 it was re-observed. What do you mean by re-observed?
yeah, that's by my understanding. Well, I have a feeling someone's going to look this up and probably figure out I got it a little bit wrong. But by my understanding, what was happening was they would observe or take a tissue sample of, let's just say, I don't know, let's say, it's just something from your abdomen, and they would look at these layers of tissue and they would find that, there was a dead space that would be in the midst of the cells, especially within the lymphatic region. And so what happens is when they would remove that tissue, everything would like collapse. You know what I mean? Everything folds on top of each other. But what happens is with living tissue, there's a space. There's actually a liquid layer that exists within the skin or the cells. It's really actually right in between the cells. And so that liquid space is known as the interstitium. And
So prior to 2016, people noted, hey, there's something here, but we can't, quantify it. And in 2016, they figured out, we'll call it this, basically.
No. I learned about interstitial fluid when I was a massage therapist. That's been around. He's saying that they understood that it was acting differently when it was this idea of how it would collapse when it was dead, but it would hold up when it was alive. So there's like this, they're observing it in a different way of understanding its properties and how it actually acts in the body differently. Is that right, Matthew?
Exactly. Almost as if something was more inflated by fluid, meaning that it expands and creates more of a visually observable space within the area between the cells. In previous, I guess medical observation, that area would sort of like collapse. And so it's not as if it's this mind-blowing actual organ. It's not like we have this whole other thing in the body. But what it really is just the observance of an additional layer of anatomy that our energy and our emotions are interacting with. And so when we say re-observed, as Nicole said, that's something that science has been aware of for many years, but I would say only in the past 4 to 5 years have people begun to understand the level to which our energy and our emotions are interacting with this strange, almost invisible liquid layer that's really only observable when something is still alive or still moving or still flowing on a certain level. So to me and my understanding, which is incredibly limited, there's probably a number of people that will hear this and go, I don't know, this guy's got it all wrong. But based on my understanding and my current work, this represents a liquid layer that we are interacting with, and it holds a charge, it holds an emotion. It holds a vibration. It can actually hold frequencies from, say like a device or like a cell phone tower. It's interacting with energy all the time. And I think one of the things that's really amazing about these fourth like density frequencies is we are experiencing an additional layer of everything. And not everyone's able to realize that. So that comes in the form of emotion, thought, energy. It's really a fascinating thing, but I hope I explained some of that to you. I hope it makes sense.
Well, so when you're observing this fluid, what changes are you seeing when someone's alive and they're seeing, like, are they observing people through different emotional states of frequency?
That's a very good question. What I find that it interacts the most with at this stage, and this is my limited understanding of being more so an intuitive than anything involved with formal like medicine. I do not have an education in that at all. But what I do have is, I believe, a pretty good understanding of some of the emotional frequencies in the body. And by my understanding at this stage, the interstitial clearing interacts most heavily with our lymphatic system, and the need for the lymphatic system on a fourth density level to be able to really clear waste, to be able to accurately and efficiently rid the body of a number of just kind of waste products. And where do these waste products come from? They come from our emotions, they come from our environment, they come from the food that we eat. And especially with fourth density, what we're realizing is when we're able to harmonize and move and mobilize this fluid through the body, it tends to release us from, like depression, anxiety, or layers of that built up energy in the body. But most importantly, and this is a very early stage, kind of like a discovery, I believe that it interacts with autoimmune issues, and it's hopefully will be sort of like a reliable way of clearing away all of the residue in the body that leads to, essentially the body attacking itself.
So what you're saying is, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand is that what you're saying is, so for instance, if someone had an emotion of grief or sadness, and that emotion or frequency starts to kind of stagnate the interstitial fluid, it starts to block it. And so when we start to clear those emotions, we're freeing up the fluid to be more able to clear the body of stuff.
Absolutely. Not only are we freeing up the fluid to physically flow and move and kind of, evacuate itself through the lymphatic system, but we're also circulating what is essentially the physical frequency of emotion in the body. And one of the things we're understanding about this great shift is that all of these frequencies, emotions, thoughts, the things that we're encountering in our inner realm, it's not that they weren't real before, but they're taking such a much greater, I guess, for lack of a better word, realness, um, and so what is happening is, as we're able to clear these liquid layers from the body, it's basically removing an additional layer of buildup that we're having. And so it's very, very helpful for clearing stagnancy of all kinds in the body. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
What I'm hearing you say doesn't sound new to me, as far as, we know that when there's been trauma, that we hold that in our body on a cellular level, and it becomes part of who we are. So it sounds to me like it's just been more discovered on the medical side, if they're actually seeing that this is a reality, that they're able to, like, instead of just an idea that we're holding on to it,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
it's more for, the logical skeptics in the world that need to see actually where this is happening.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the signposts that we point to for, showing real world examples of the level to which emotional and energetic frequencies actually affect the human body. And so I think you're right. It really isn't new. In fact, to be technical, none of this stuff is new. I think what we're doing is we're kind of going through like a remembrance. We're going through, as we know, this great awakening. And so people's eyes are opening on a number of different levels. And I think right now within like the medical like community, I don't know if anybody's focused on the interstitium. I have no idea if this is a thing that they're talking about. Maybe everyone knows and they're like, oh yeah, we already know about that whole thing. But in my work, these are the areas that keep showing up over and over and over again. And so it has a great relevance to me. But yeah, I don't know. It might not be new. Maybe none of this is new.
No, well, I'm interested because as a visual and understanding the body and exactly what it looks like from an anatomical point of view and physiological point of view, from your standpoint as a healer, how do you use this knowledge when you go in and you heal someone? Because for instance, if I'm working with someone and I energetically feel something going on in their body, I'll go in my mind and start working in the body and working with certain layers. And because I know what certain things are, it facilitates it more for me in anchoring into it. How does it help you when you're working with someone and clearing their energy?
That's a very good question. I seem to be a weird mix of a multi-sensory thing in that usually the first thing I'll do when like connecting with someone and trying to gauge the level of whether it be stagnancy or blockage or just foreign energy or really just saying what's going on with this person, I tend to first have just, or rather, I tend to get a feeling, sort of like a clairsentience, almost like you'll hear a tone of a person's voice. And within that tone, it's almost like you can kind of dive into the wavelength of the frequency. And within just the tone of an individual's voice, there's a number of kind of what I would call vibrations or even emotions or almost little hooks that will kind of tie into what I understand to be the emotional frequency of, say, like a meridian, of a chakra, of an organ that tends to work along with, what I believe to be sort of like a claircognizance or like a clairsentience thing where I'll sort of hear or I'll get signals or I'll get feelings within the body. So for me, it could be a really weird kind of jumbled up process. I would like to say, what we're really doing, and probably you're also doing as well, is really some of the foundational elements of, say, like, heart based, like a telepathy, in which everything is already known. So I think for some of us, like maybe in your case, you will get that on a visual level. For me, I might get that in somewhat of a physical or like a cognizant level. But I have a feeling it's the same mechanism for everyone, just within a different
Mm-hmm.
category. And I don't know if that answers your
Mm-hmm.
question, but
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So as people are moving through fourth density, how does the interstitial fluid or the interstitium react as you're going up in frequency?
that's a very good question. I believe, like I said earlier, it's very much like a cymatic experiment in which whatever vibration hits this liquid layer will affect the contents underneath. And now, I know we mentioned a lot about the interstitium. That's just one aspect of what I think is really going on. In addition to that, and this has a lot to do with the interstitial spaces in between the organs and in, other layers of the body, what I believe is really happening is we're experiencing an additional layer of activation within every area of the body, meaning we're experiencing a different layer of energy from, say, like our liver, from our lungs, from our spleen. A lot of these, I believe, are kind of timed, sort of, it's kind of like an activation that will take place within like a whole group of people. I shouldn't say like a collective, but maybe within a soul group. Certain individuals within this group will activate and certain elements of their body will turn on at different times during the incarnational cycle. I think right now, as we're going into 2020, we're experiencing a huge ongoing activation of a few areas in the body. And I feel like I'm already kind of twisting your question off into a tangent, but what I believe is happening is we're experiencing a multi-layered activation of not only the lymphatic system, not only the interstitial space, but the way in which those frequencies interact with things like the liver, the spleen, especially the lungs. But along with that, to make it even more complicated, that's also interacting with the chakras, and especially that solar plexus chakra right now for nearly everyone out there, no matter where you're at. It feels like collectively we have a huge, massive energy right there in the body. And so
I haven't asked I don't know, it's a spiritual 101 question in a while. For clarification for the listeners out there that don't know what the heck you're talking about. You mentioned incarnational cycle. I have not heard that term before, or maybe it's something that I know and it's just a new term, but can you like hit on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, what I'm talking about with the incarnational cycle refers to the idea of reincarnation, and the idea that we live a multitude of lives. It is my personal understanding and my experience that each and every one of us that is alive at this stage of the journey, meaning if you're a human being that's living on this earth plane with consciousness, you chose to be here. You chose to be born. And some people get mad when I say that because they're like, I didn't
Right.
choose my parents. I didn't choose all this stuff. But the reality is, by my experience, we chose to be born. We chose to incarnate. And so what that means is we go through a multitude of these lifetimes. And so when I say the incarnational cycle, what I mean is this here life cycle, this here version of Brian, this here version of Matthew, this version of us that's existing on the plane. And so as we go through this specific incarnational cycle, for many of us, and I don't know if this is the truth for everyone that's alive right now, but for the vast majority of us, this is the farthest we have made it within our consciousness journey throughout the multitude of lives that we've had. And so, in my opinion, this incarnational cycle is probably one of the most important. I believe that it's probably one of the last times a lot of us will be living in third density
Wow.
as a human. But I realize that's also a really big can of worms for a lot of people. So.
Sounds pretty exciting to me.
Oh, totally. It's what we came here for.
This third density stuff is not easy.
Yeah, I feel you.
Well, you talked about these cycles and you do timeline clearing. How do you, what's the purpose of timeline clearing, first of all?
Yeah, timeline clearing, I believe, and this is also, once again, it's like a colorful term to understand a vibratory state of existence. So I guess we could say when I do a timeline clearing, what I'm looking at is a number of areas. First off, I tend to use a lot of tarot. Why do I use tarot? Because I think it's a really, really easy method to tap into not only the higher self, not only, our guides, but really to look at the overall picture of the energy that surrounds a scenario or a situation or like a relationship. And what we discover is that when we look at it kind of from this standing back like point of view, it's almost like we pull ourselves and zoom out from a person's energy. And what that does is that gives us kind of an overview. And it's not so much looking at, where is my timeline going exactly? Where am I heading exactly? But what I believe we're able to do is kind of pan out and take a look at the overall energetic momentum of an individual, meaning based on where you are right now within the multitude of layers of your body that we have access to in the moment, where is your energy leading? What is it bringing us toward? And so when we look at that kind of timeline, we begin to understand certain elements of anatomy, certain blockages, certain things that will show up along the way that allow us to then take somewhat of a control. And I know a lot of you guys have the understanding that we're literally creating this world like our reality in every moment. So I believe that the idea behind the timeline reading gives us an ability to get a greater viewpoint over the larger movements of what's happening in our life. And so what that leads us to is then these little signposts or these elements of energy in the body that we can work with or kind of shift or like release that help us get back into that greater alignment or to be rolling down that hill, toward the thing that we want to be aiming toward. And so I don't know that it's not like we're getting in a time machine and we're, like heading out to 1988 or anything like that. But what we are is viewing and working with the vibratory path that we're creating in this world. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, when you do timeline clearing, are you working are you working to collapse certain timelines? Or are you just wanting to clear a specific timeline? Are you working with multiple timelines?
That's a good question. I would like to think that there are infinite, that there are an infinite number of possibilities. And I think I take that understanding with a very, very surface level realization that at this stage we know so little about what I believe to be an actual sentient frequency, meaning as a little bit of a non sequitur, I do believe that time is actually alive, or what we understand as time is alive. Now, when we come to the idea of kind of like artificial timelines or collapsing timelines or moving individuals to another timeline, there's a lot of kind of like fanciful ideas and kind of like probably wrong just ideas about how that works. from what I can understand at this stage is we're working with a vibratory state, much like a groove on a record. And at various times in our life, based on the overall kind of frequency that we're carrying, the emotional quality of that, our outlook, kind of like our overall harmonic integrity, it's really easy for us to get bumped down, to get bumped up. When we work with timeline energy, I think what we're doing is cutting off cords or connections to foreign things outside of the body. And what that does is, I believe it brings us into a state of sovereignty, into a state of wholeness. It's almost like we're kind of cutting out all of the exterior influences. We're kind of like removing all of the energy that's not yours. And what I find is that when we do that, it allows people to make somewhat of like a correction in their course. They kind of like pull themselves back on track, and they're able to kind of, realign themselves with where they think they're going or what's happening. And so I believe that we are choosing a timeline probably on a moment by moment basis, based on, what we're thinking of, how we're feeling, where our thoughts are going. And so it's a pretty dense, multi-layered thing.
Earlier, you mentioned that you were helping people clear stuff that isn't even theirs. What would be your advice to the listeners in understanding how to perceive what emotional blockages or energetic stuff that they're going through, how it's theirs or how they're picking up on other people's stuff?
Yeah, well, we're totally all doing this every day on a constant basis, and what we find is as we go through this incarnational cycle, there's that keyword again. We go through this process of kind of accelerating our sensitivity. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. But what we're discovering right now at this 2019 stage is that the vast majority of people on this planet have awoken to some level of enhanced empathy. And so, what does that mean? We're feeling things on a different level. We're feeling more of what other people are feeling. A really good example of this would be, let's say you guys are at a gas station, or you're at the store, or you're at a grocery store, you're buying some food, and you're standing in line with some individual, and maybe you just catch the corner of their eye, or you get the little bit of their expression, and you feel that crazy energy. You'll feel the negativity. It happens to literally everyone. They don't even need to hear the individual's voice, and they'll get a feeling. That's, in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to understand an energy that might not be yours. It's something that the body gives off. And so when we understand some of the dynamics of fourth density energy in the body and the way we're expanding, we realize that we're interacting with everyone else's energy all the time, including our own. And so I would like to say the easiest way to kind of gauge another person's energy is to go into public, be around your friends or family, notice the ways in which your thoughts or your emotions change. I know for those of us that had really intense, like parents or siblings, just being in the room with them or watching them come home, and you get that, you'll notice that look on a person's face, and you'll get a
Right.
feeling in your body. And in my opinion, that's one of the easiest ways to understand another individual's energy. So, yeah.
I think that's great advice. I think that's really cool because everyone's got a sense of understanding, especially when it comes to family, how certain people make you feel in your family. And so watching and paying attention to those shifts when you're in their presence I think that's what it all comes down to, is just being more aware and really tuning into the subtle shifts that happen within you and understanding like what your energy is and what it is, and you're taking it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matthew, this is Frank, and it sounds like what we're talking about here is quantum entanglement, and what your work is enabling your client to do is release him or herself from the quantum entanglement with others that can diffuse our focus.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to think so. I really, really would like to think so. I have to be honest with you. I don't really understand any of like the quantum stuff. I don't even really understand science. If you want to get technical, I barely even understand some of the workings within the body. But through some strange method or some strange, you know, like process, I've been granted some form of a knowledge or an ability to move these frequencies. I really, truly hope that we are interacting on the quantum level at this point, and really that's kind of why I think a lot of my focus goes into fourth density, because it's really easy for me to look at those frequencies in the body and understand this is all where we're going. We're all sort of like moving into the stage. And so if that's a quantum technology, I think that is awesome. And
You should check out. We just recorded another episode the other day with Maureen and Jacoby, and another person we've had on a number of times.
oh, cool.
And Nicole gave her a great plug while we were recording it, as a intro to quantum. She's got a bunch of videos, so you should check that out.
Her. Yeah, I probably will actually. Thank you.
Yeah, her season 1 on quantum manifestation just changes the whole ball game and understanding timeline, manipulation of your quantum field, all that great stuff.
Oh, I love that, especially when there's individuals that can like explain it in, an understandable way where I can actually like grab onto it. So much of my work is like an intuitively based thing that I think that like if people knew the level to which I interacted on intuition alone, they would either be one, incredibly excited, or they would be two, really, really scared. But yet I believe that is kind of like the modality. That is sort of like the method for a lot of us. We have this skill or this ability and we just lean into what it is. So it's always really exciting when I get like a confirmation from people in the medical field. I had actually worked on an individual about a month or so ago in which, and this is, kind of a weird sort of like a can of worms we're going down here, but one of the things we're discovering within the energy body is sort of like a split in between the masculine and like the feminine archetypes within the body. Oftentimes it goes right down the middle, but within that, we're discovering some structures in the body and sort of seals and blockages that are very common in soul groups. And I had a client recently that had almost like a blockage between the left and the right side of the body. In fact, the left side of her body was almost completely shut off. And by shut off, I mean very dead in sensation, very weak, almost as if one side of her body was kind of hanging down. And what we did is in the course of our clearing, we actually harmonized and brought back the masculine and the feminine halves of the body, almost as if we were squeezing them back together. After that session, I actually had made like a recommendation to her, hey, maybe you should go see like a traditional Chinese medicine doctor to kind of have this work checked out for you. And what's wild is she did. She went to a college of Chinese medicine in New York State, and they actually verified that both of the pulses on each side of the body had been harmonized, whereas the week prior, she had some sort of an unexplained kind of gap in between the integrity of the pulse flow on each side of the body. And so what that taught me was that there was a layer of, say, like a confirmation that we were getting with these energetic structures that we were working with in the body. And it's a documented thing that I was able to get. So very, very, very cool. So there is something really going on there, at least on some level.
Yeah, you're you're definitely not a fraud.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's really cool that, well, I totally agree. When you can get that kind of confirmation outside of the intuitive and spiritual community that is anchored more in science and technology that can confirm it, then it really anchors it into this reality. And it's nice to have those confirmations. Not that you need it to continue doing your work or to know that you're having an effect, because clearly it starts to show up in how your clients are feeling, interacting, probably shifts in their life are happening. Because if you start to heal the body and the energy field, then that'll just shift into everything outside of the person.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Matthew, to expand on that maybe a little bit, not in terms of science, but in terms of my experiential capacity in this life, my sense is our intuitive interactions, like what you're talking about in implementing healing, and plus just in intuitive awareness, this is the next level that all of us are moving into in terms of our intelligence level. And intuition is the new intelligence quotient. It's the new healing modality. So it's an experience rather than quantifiable scientifically, although that's happening as well.
Yeah.
You're tapped into the Akashic records. So it's like you don't need to have studied the medical books or, and you say you don't understand. You just know this stuff because you're intuitive. And that's like Frank said, I think we're all moving to that. It's to where we're all knowing. We just
Oh,
have to
absolutely.
tap in.
Oh, I believe that's exactly what it is. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about this past year, and I don't know, maybe some of you guys have heard of this, but a lot of us are having expanded contact with a future version of ourselves, an actual future version of you that exists on a higher dimensional timeline that has a knowledge or like a connection with the 3 and 4D version of you that's here right now. And
Like higher self?
oh, absolutely. But even more so, an actual network of consciousnesses that you have existed as in a multitude of lifetimes. And to make it even weirder, that you currently do still exist as on another plane. One of the things we're discovering with this dimensional shift is you have this expanded layer of access to those versions of yourself. It's my opinion that those are some of the methods by which individuals that are really embracing this change in the body are able to tap into elements of knowledge or understandings that we weren't necessarily given through some form of formal education. One of the things we're also noticing with that, and maybe this is a side effect of the expansion of consciousness, it seems as though we are also dealing with sometimes some of the egoic distortions of those previous versions of us as well. And this is just my opinion, but I think that we're also here to help clear those past and concurrently existing versions of ourselves as well. So I think one of the additional kind of side effects of this ascension process is that we're also clearing and working with just a multitude of versions of us. And I realize that opens a really crazy like can of worms for some people, but Frank, it makes total sense. I think this is the next stage of our evolution. So, yeah.
Just a point of clarification. Nothing is strange on this podcast.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. Well, there you go. We're interacting with a multitude of versions of you in every moment. So, good.
We go from spiritual 101 to what the fuck you all talking about?
Oh, perfect. Welcome to my world then. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
What's been your experience from your observation of the collective, kind of some of the shifts that have been happening as the 2019 is winding down? And what do you foresee coming into 2020?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so in my opinion and experience, 2019 was one of the most polarizing years of our entire experience here on the Earth plane. And why is that? I believe we are being set up for this great sort of like a convergence. And I'm not talking about like a solar event or, this big light in the sky and everyone suddenly goes into fifth density and we turn into a light body. It's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a gradual and also noticeable shift in acceleration of consciousness that I believe has begun ramping up in 2019. I know a lot of us saw big changes in our lives around this Lionsgate event in early August. And I know a lot of us, and probably the people that are here on this podcast as well, can kind of trace back some of the events and some of the changes that have taken place in the months since. What it seems is going on, at least from my view and the clients that I'm working with right now, a lot of us are part of a soul group of individuals that are making a choice right at the end of 2019. In fact, if you want to get technical, that choice actually culminates around the solar eclipse that occurs, I believe, on the evening of December 25th into the morning of December 26th of this year. In which on that solar eclipse, and just so you guys know, every solar eclipse is a gateway, but what it is a timeline shift opportunity. And so a lot of us right now are making choices, alignments, we're going through clearings, we're going through just changes in our lives that are setting us up for what's going to begin to take place in, somewhat of like a renaissance period. It's already starting, but in 2020, based on my view, we're kicking that into the next stage of what's going on. I will even be so bold as to say that I believe right around the middle of January, we're going to be experiencing the next stage of a great influx of individuals coming into greater awareness of this awakening or going through these quote unquote awakening events. And so I think at the end of 2019, we're literally setting up the groundwork for this next version of what we might even call the quote unquote new world, if you want to go down that road. that we're all going to be living in 2020. And so I think anatomically, that seems to correspond with activations in a couple interesting areas of the body. Number one, that solar plexus chakra, which we talked about earlier. But number two, one of the more what I would call tertiary or secondary energy centers in the body, that being the thymic or high heart chakra.
Mm.
And that has, to make it even weirder, that has a special sort of like a relationship with the 8th and 9th chakras outside of the body. Some people call this the soul star chakra, but there seems to be sort of like an awakening on like the mass level of those structures in the body. And so how does that translate into your day-to-day experience? Enhanced empathy, enhanced like a connection. When we bridge from the solar plexus into that high heart chakra, that's often the stage in the incarnation in which people begin to, learn about their mission. They step into that next version of themselves. Some people have these huge life changes and they make a 180 and go in a new direction, but I believe we're going to continue to see a bit more of that moving into 2020. So
No, that makes sense because, well, that ninth chakra is at the back of the head, right where the skull meets the spine. And so that is known as a very golden gateway for spirit. You receive a lot of information through that chakra. And the high heart chakra too, that one opening up the 8th chakra where you said over the thymus gland. There's a lot of activations happening there too that really take people to a completely new level in integrating the heart. So what happens is when you start activating that area, the whole heart chakra, known as the green chakra, becomes this almost like a mother blue. So you're almost like you take on the truth, the 5th chakra, and the fourth chakra, the green. It all starts to change into this beautiful blue, Mother Mary blue, I should say, which is really cool. So this idea of convergence, I love that. So for 2020, seeing this idea of more people awakening, I think happens through the extreme polarization that's been happening this year.
Oh, absolutely.
I feel like that polarization is almost an activation for many people.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And that polarization comes in forms of turmoil in your life, basically?
It certainly can.
That's how we experience it in the 3D?
It certainly can. I think not in every stage, but that tends to be one of the greatest catalysts for some form of change, realization, or growth, some mechanism of pain or a painful realization, or for some people it's a bitter awakening. But no, that's absolutely what's going on. And it's interesting, Nicole, that you referenced this from the viewpoint of the melding of color fields within the energy body, because you're actually touching on a very interesting phenomenon, which is the idea of chakras melding or sort of like compressing into 3 primary energy centers. And so when you're talking about the method by which or the way in which these colors sort of form and like coalesce within these areas of the body, that's actually a real thing. And it's also my opinion that the 4th density physical energy body layout for the human template is actually comprised of 3 primary energy centers, rather than what we would call, the 7 layers within the internal energy body structure. I believe that part of this ascension process is us actually moving into 3 energy centers in the body. And so when you talk about the colors melding and shifting and joining all together, in my opinion, that is a real thing. So, yeah.
Cool. I like it.
Interesting.
So what will the 3 colors be?
That's a really good question. I don't actually know the color breakdown. I think for me, I've understood this as the forming of what are called the Dan-Tiens, the Dan-Tien energy structure in the body. And for those of you guys that are listening to this, you can Google those. I believe they're talked about in a number of modalities, primarily Eastern and Chinese. energy medicine, they talk about these three primary energy structures. Now, the reality is, by my understanding, these already exist within the human body, but they're existing somewhat as like a template layer, almost like a shape or an outline that will be superimposed over a layer of the body. And as we continue to go through this process right now, it's my opinion that a lot of people have already sort of like compressed, they've already transformed and moved into this three energy center structure. I think a lot of us are in varying levels of that sort of like a compression or that melding. And what happens is, and once again, this is my theory and my experience, but what happens is when those layers begin to meld and join within the body, those are often the breakthrough periods in which we begin to experience enhanced intuition, enhanced empathy. Some of the fourth density frequencies in the body begin to kick on with greater kind of frequency when those chakras begin to join. And so some people may even be asking, how does this happen? How can I accelerate this? Is this a thing that we have control over? I believe on a certain level, we do have an impact over the way the energy body advances. And I think if you're wondering how can I shift this on my own, it's in my opinion, the simple starting point is really, really boldly confronting and dealing with our old wounds, especially the inner child. And so I don't know if that makes sense.
You just
Bing! I love that.
you just said our favorite word.
Oh, cool.
You did, and this whole time you've been talking, that's what I've been thinking about, that the inner child is the key to releasing this trauma, and that is what, is holding it in ourselves, that we have to go back to the inner child to release that trauma and release that energy in the
Oh, I
cells.
absolutely agree. This is a thing that we do in each and every clearing that I do, especially the group class that we're doing right now. And this is just my opinion. This is what works for me, is that when we tap into that true childhood imagination, that version of you inside you that still lives in the world of magic, that version of you that's in there that can imagine anything like a cartoon in your mind's eye and is willing to sit there and play with it and imagine, like the way we did when we were children. In my opinion, that is one of the easiest ways to begin to connect with the quote unquote astral realms, quote unquote fourth density energy, which is really, really, really just moving outside of the bounds of our physical world. And each of us has like a training ground, has a literal laboratory that exists inside us with which we've been given the ability to test and work with all of these things. So I think really helping the inner child is probably one of the most important things we can do at this stage. So yeah.
I just met my inner child, and
He's been locked in a closet
he
for a
has,
long time.
yeah. But I promised him that we would watch Looney Tunes on Saturday.
Beautiful. I hope you do. I hope you do. That's a real thing.
Aw.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do that
Oh,
tomorrow.
please. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
All this energy work that you do and people have done to them, to me, it seems like it's kind of like taking an Advil or something. It's like it helps you relieve the pain and the pressure for just a little bit so that you can step back and get a new perspective on things. Because at the end of the day, it's up to you entirely to clear this energy, and only you can do it. And I believe you can only do it through your inner child. So, to go have a Reiki session or a clearing with you or something like that is really valuable in the sense that you kind of get a reprieve from the stuck energy and place that you're in and get a new perspective. But I just want people to know that you don't need anybody outside of you to do this work for you, that it's all within your own control to heal and clear this trauma and this energy within you.
I agree utterly and completely. A lot of people will come to me right now, and it's very much like that on a certain level. We will encounter these people that are like, just take everything from me. Go ahead, take it all. And I don't know that that's actually possible. I think maybe there's some healers out there that can just like, okay, I'm going to just scoop up all of the negative energy in your body, and there you go, you're done. But I don't know that it works like that. I believe that we really are just kind of opening the door for individuals. I think that there are people within our communities that have been sort of placed here and made sort of like an agreement that they would be part of the group of individuals that would help facilitate the opening of those doors for people. And I think, on a certain level, maybe that's kind of my role as a healer. I don't know that I'm actually healing anyone. I think what we're kind of doing, and this might be a weird kind of non sequitur here, but what I think we're doing is essentially, at least in my work, taking a tour through the human body and actively opening up doors or areas or little pipes that get stuck or blocked. And so I think that inner child is incredibly helpful for that, because that's kind of the mechanism by which we enter that internal world. Because I think each of us has that child still rolling around inside there that really needs to be acknowledged. But when it comes to healing, I think that's kind of our doorway into that sort of realm, is by interacting with that child. So yeah, there's absolutely a responsibility on the part of everyone that engages in healing, to really do your own self work. And some people are doing it, some people aren't. I would like to think that in this coming year, we're all going to come to a greater level of understanding of, how we can interact with those frequencies. And
Matthew, my sense, well, first of all, any healing, if it's effective, is a co-creative process between the healer and the person being, quote, healed, end quote. My sense of what you offer is, in a sense, a reprieve, opening a window, showing your client what is possible, but then it's up to him or her to take the ball and run with it in their own healing journey. Otherwise, it's a codependent relationship that doesn't serve the client at all. But you're giving the client a leg up, in a sense, showing him or her what's possible.
I would like to think so. I would like to think so. It's funny that you mentioned the image of opening windows or doors, as an interesting synchronistic statement. That's actually one of the tools I use in clearings, where it kind of will go down into like a theta state, and I'll take people in their house. I'll be like, everyone knows what the front door looks like. Enter your home. And now I'd like you to start turning on all the lights. Then I'd like you to open the windows. Now I'd like you to open all the doors. And there's an interesting sort of like it's an interesting exercise toward opening up channels and elements of our body that are usually closed off. So I appreciate that statement. Thank you.
I remember you doing that the first time you were on.
Oh, really?
You walked us through a little meditation or something, and you used the front door imagery.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you. That's a tool that literally anyone can use. It really, really is. When we use these sort of gestures, or like an exercise, almost like a fanciful kind of like interplay, with that inner child in there that's like, okay, I'm going to open the door inside my mind. That's actually a tool that will, when used with intention, begin to open up channels and elements of the body. So yeah, that's a trip. Thank you.
I was going to say that it's kind of like you could take it down to the level of like liposuction, where if you go and get a bunch of fat removed and then you still continue to eat McDonald's and burgers and shit like that, like you're really not assisting the process. Like people can help you and give you an opportunity to start, and like you said, like you open all the doors and the fresh air comes in, and it's like a whole blank slate, like a new beginning. But if you continue to go into the patterns that have got you to the place in the first place, then you're just going to continue recreating what you're doing. So I think it's great that we have different people in our community who are willing to open the doors, and also open the doors in a way, like Frank said. I think it's so important that a codependent relationship is never created between someone who's facilitating the healing, or at least assisting in it, and the person who's coming for it, and understanding how empowering that is for both parties involved. Super empowering. And I see a lot of that coming through in the spiritual community more, like really people empowering one another and talking to them in ways that make them realizing you're the creator, you have total power over this. And when you're new and you're awakening, you may not know all of the paths to follow. You may not know all the tricks of the trade. You may not know all the biohacks. And that's what the people that we go to are for.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
So what have you got going on coming up? Do you have any workshops? Do you have any, I know you do your readings sometimes, you do live readings on Facebook. You got
Right.
anything coming
Yeah.
up?
So, well, yeah, I think that's a good question. We just started an 8 week, or excuse me, a 6 week course that I'm doing. It started on November 17th, and what it is I call it the Intuitive Activation and Timeline Unification Workshop. Which basically what we're doing is we go through a multi-week process. We meet every Sunday. We go through instruction, education on specific structures in the body, chakras, say like meridian organs, and really what we're doing is like a weekly meeting and then a weekly clearing in which we're actively learning about and then demonstrating the energetic movement through etheric structures in the body, on the idea that we're moving towards this timeline shift on December 26th of this year. So what I decided to do is make a class in which we would go week by week leading up into that eclipse, clearing structures, learning about what's going on. Once again, going back to the idea that we are making a choice going into 2020. To make that choice even weirder, I think it's part of the process by which we are making a social memory complex, for those of you guys that are familiar with the law of one. But in my own work, I do private sessions almost on a daily basis. I haven't done very many lives lately because I've been so busy. We're kind of branching into like conferences and events. I will be doing Conscious Life Expo in February of 2020 out here in LA. And the New Living Expo, I believe, up in the Bay Area, which is in April. So we do have a couple events coming up. I would say right now the easiest way to find me would be through my website, rememberyouration.com. And yeah, we got classes, group stuff. But yeah, that's what we're doing now.
Oh, great. Great. So we'll leave all that information in the show notes. And do you want to leave the audience with a final message?
Yeah, thank you. I would say if there's anything that people need to know right now is that you are quite literally opening up and activating an additional layer of yourself. Look at the version of you that's present right here in November of 2019. And if you can, look back at a picture of the version of you that you were only a year ago. I absolutely guarantee every single person that sees that you will notice such a tremendous difference in who you are, how you feel, and what you are turning into, that it should show you that we are quite literally in a process of turning into the next version of ourselves. So how can you retain sovereignty over your energy? Well, not only is it about clearing and dealing with your old wounds, but a number of physical structures in the body. And I guess if there's one physical structure that I think people should know about today, that would be your lymphatic system. Actually, the liquid aquarium layer of water and plasma and fluid that lines your body, that in my opinion is one of the most untouched and unrecognized areas that are interacting with environmental and individual energies on a daily basis. So to summarize, pay attention to your lymphatics. They will literally clear every other structure in your body. And in the meantime, understand that you're being affected by a multitude of energies from all directions. It's part of what we came here for. And I think if there's anything we can do, it's to continue to generate awareness and understand that we literally chose this.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and happy Thanksgiving to all of our American listeners. Matthew, doing anything fun for Thanksgiving?
Let's see. My son's coming out. I'm gonna hang out with some people in my family. I guess you guys already had Thanksgiving. Oh wait, you are Canadian, right? Are you Canadian?
Yeah, I do 2 Thanksgivings a year.
Yeah. So you guys get like the double thing. But yeah, I don't know. I think we're just doing family stuff. I don't know. I'm so far like removed from the 3D world at this point. I'm like, oh, there's a holiday coming up. Let's show up for that. So I think it's just a bunch of hanging out and probably eating.
Yeah. Oh,
It's a good day for that.
It is a good day for that.
Eat up, everybody.
Eat up. Enjoy the people that you love being around.
And thanks for our audience for listening to us on Thanksgiving. Make it a play it for your whole family.
Yeah.
That already thinks you're crazy. Go ahead and just put it on the speakers and play this episode.
Wake some people up. All right. Well, thanks so much, Matthew, for being on the show, and thanks Frank for guest co-hosting with us. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks for including me.
Thank you all for joining our show. We appreciate you tuning in and supporting us. If you have any questions you would like answered on the show or any guests you would like to hear on our show, please email that information to us at info@enlightenup.us. And please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you're interested in contacting Nicole or myself for some coaching or any of the other services we provide, you can find out more about Nicole at inflexibleme.com, and my website is lisaloveslove.com. Thank you again for joining us and supporting our show, and we will be back with you all next week.